names popping up here and there.
Yeah, yeah, I'm good to go. So as soon as you're ready, go ahead and begin.
Cool. Yeah, so just want to say thanks everybody for taking the time to meet with us today. And we've got a mixture of people. So it looks like some people that have Composer know what it is, and some people where this might be their introduction to it. Scott mentioned this earlier, but as we're going through this demonstration today, absolutely type in questions in the chat box. And at the very end, we're going to go through each question and have a Q&A session, so we'll get those answered. But as they come up, feel free to go ahead and type it in while it's fresh. We've got a great demonstration set up for you guys today, but just introductions right off the gate. Scott is the technical product manager for Composer as well as the other technical communications products. We'll cover that a little bit later. I am the sales counterpart to that, so I know what our customers are doing with this and how they're using it and the impact it's had on their business. Feel free to reach out to either one of us at the end if you have further questions or want to even set up a demonstration or test some things out. We are going to, well, actually, I'll let it be a little bit of a surprise. Scott has something special for you guys today, but first, I think we're going to look at some examples, right?
Yeah.
Of the types of output that you can create with Composer and what people are doing with it.
Yep, thanks, Blaine. So yeah, exactly. So we have a few things in store for you today. First off, for those who haven't heard about Composer or brand new to it, I do want to cover just real briefly the examples, or I should say a few examples that you can develop from Composer. So let me go ahead and just show those, and then I'll be quick here just to give you guys just a real quick overview of what you can produce in Composer and really what it's for, and then we'll get into the presentation of actually developing some live technical documentation. So first off, Composer can make raster images, so very high quality renderings, and it's super fast, and we'll cover this in pretty good detail today on how to actually push these out. I mean, we're talking seconds. You can create a very highly detailed rendering. It's good for websites, good for any kind of documentation, you know, sales presentations, that kind of thing. We can also output vector output. So the difference between raster and vector is a raster image is like a JPEG, it's pixelated, where a vector output is line drawing. So we have the ability to actually create hotspots of that line drawing and break it down into the bill of materials, components, we have the balloons, and this is all directly out of Composer. It's a push, it's a publication. You really don't have to do much to set this up. And if I click on an individual component, we can break it down. Hit the back button, we have another example, like another part here with the bill of materials. So this is really handy if you need to put together some kind of parts list. Let's say that you have like a bunch of parts that are going onto the shop floor and some assembly instructions, and it's like, hey, on this cart you should have X amount of these, X amount of those, and they can easily look at a parts list like this and verify, yes, I have all the components I need to build this thing. Or if your end customer is going to be putting it together, they could also utilize this. Okay, next is a PDF, and this is really what we're going to be focusing on today. So we're going to be developing something similar to this in Composer, where we have, you know, just a kind of general overview of what this is it's a SOLIDWORKS assembly that's been brought over to Composer. Composer is a standalone application, so it's not an add-in to SOLIDWORKS, so you don't have to keep it in the engineering section of your company. You can install it on anybody's machine. It's a pretty lightweight program. It is still 3D, but it's not. It doesn't have those requirements that a 3D CAD tool is going to have as far as the computer goes. Also, you don't have to be an engineer in order to use this. Engineers use it, non-engineers use it, everybody can use it. And it creates real crisp and clean assembly instructions based off the SOLIDWORKS model. SOLIDWORKS model updates, this updates as well, everything is associative. The tools, that's the SOLIDWORKS toolbox that comes over with the assembly. And then any authoring content, text, arrows, detailed circles, detailed views, that's all developed right in Composer and just pushed out as a PDF. And so using Composer, there's no okay, we're going to export a bunch of images, we're going to import that into InDesign or Word or Publisher or something and add arrows and annotations and text and then try to produce a a JPEG or a PDF of that, which is a very common process used today, using alternate means besides Composer to create step-by-step assembly instructions. So that's going to be the focus today here. A couple other examples, just real quick overview of what else you can do with the software is create animation. But you don't have to be an animator to create animations in Composer. As you create those pages, so like, hey, we're going to assemble this together, step 1, step 2, step 3, Composer will knit those together and create an animation for you, and all you have to do is save out the video. So it's really simple to create real basic step-by-step assembly instructions in a video publication. Super easy to do. Now you can take that to the next level and do something more like what you're seeing on screen right now, where you can have full control over the parts and the shading and the lighting and all that stuff. It's totally possible, but you don't have to take advantage of those more advanced tools in order to produce very clean and video content for your assembly instruction. And we'll talk about that too a little bit. Very last thing is it's called the it's the exe. That's just the file type because it is a self-executable file. But this is the Composer player, and the Composer player we can save out as an exe, so it's embedded in this file, so you can send it to anybody and they don't have to install it, or you can just send them a Composer file, and if they install the Composer player they can view it. The end result's exactly the same. It's just however you want to deliver that internally or externally, and you get everything with this output. So if you think about it kind of like a PDF, you can treat it as such. So I can say, hey, we're going to go to the next page. You can print all pages from here. You can treat it just like a PDF if you wanted to, but it's going to animate between the pages. So when you go from step 1 to step 2, you're actually going to see that transition, which really helps define what's happening on screen. Because when you look at a PDF, it's page 1, page 2, and there's no movement, and so you're like, what just happened? Where did that guy move? Did that just be assembled together? So you got to read and, okay, I get it. Well, by showing these real subtle movements, you can eliminate a lot of the text. Or you can have the text there and just the end user can decide if they actually want to read it or say, oh, I get it, that part moved out, and I'm going to assemble it together or something like that. You also get that technical output, the SVG file, which was the vectorized graphics data, and it operates much the same way, where we have, you know, a bill of material, and if I just mouse over anything in the bill of material, the parts are going to highlight. So you get the PDF output, you get this output, you get even video, and so you can have interactive video right within the player. And so I can, you know, this is playing an animation, I can rotate it. So I'm actually rotating it live right now and looking at different angles during the animation. If I let go, it's going to snap back to what was predefined. And you define all that in Composer and just save it out as this exe or just a Composer file and use the player to view it. Very, very last thing here is it's still a 3D model, right? So we can pan, we can hide things, we can rotate it. By hide things, I mean I'm just tabbing through right now, see that there's some component here that I really want to get to. I can tab to it and make a selection or something like that. So got a 3D model there. Okay, so that is the examples from Composer. Now I would like to move into really what we're here for today. So we have two different distinct workflows. And I'm not trying to pick on SOLIDWORKS or anything like that, but SOLIDWORKS wasn't originally designed to, or isn't even designed today to make assembly instructions. You can use it to make assembly instructions because it's a 3D tool. So really anything that's 3D, you can take the model, you can rotate it, as long as you can create exploded views or something like that, and take screenshots or anything like that to get the views, to get those images out into like a Word document or a publisher document or something in order to compile all that together to develop the assembly instructions. Now the problem with that is there's a lot of steps. For one, it's time consuming. There's no real good way to ever update that. It's non-associative, so if you make an adjustment, you got to go back into the CAD program, which we're using SOLIDWORKS for this example, make adjustments. Hopefully your configurations don't explode. If they do, you have to fix them, and so on and so forth, and push out the images and recreate the content to update it. And so the update process is the same as the original creation process. Where in Composer, it's much, much quicker because it's all together. You import, you do your steps, you export. if something updates in SOLIDWORKS, you update that in Composer, and then you push out your publication. So let me open up a video here. Now I would like to, I'm just going to hit play here. So what's happening is this is the process in SOLIDWORKS. And I got a little timer down there so we can know that we're staying true to life here. So this is in real time. And I would like to show both of these processes, but it would take longer than we have allotted for this webinar. This process right now is the process in SOLIDWORKS. So it's taking the assembly, isolating it. And you see that I'm not rushing here. I'm going to be racing this video, but I'm going to be using Composer. So I'm using what I'm going to be doing is going to be much quicker than we can do it here. But basically they're creating configurations, isolating, going to be saving all those images and creating the technical documentation. So I'm going to use Composer to do the same thing. And I'm going to attempt to work with this video in my way. So that's going to slow me down a little bit, but it should be fine. Let's make it a little bit smaller, something like that. And then, yeah, so let's get started. So basically, I'm going to be repeating what's happening here, but I'm going to be using Composer to do it. So the first thing I want to do is I want to isolate my assembly. So I got this engine, this Boxer engine, and all I need to do is select it in the assembly tree that comes over from SOLIDWORKS. And then I'm just going to right-click and isolate, just like that. So now I've went ahead and isolated that engine. So a much easier way to isolate components. And I just want to kind of, let's rotate this a little bit just so I can get a good angle for my exploded view, which is developing right now in SOLIDWORKS there. So I'm going to go ahead and create a view. I'm also going to create what's a camera view, and I'll kind of explain that, why I have that. Basically, that controls my camera angle, and I can always get back to my camera angle, and I don't have to worry about anything messing up here. So let's go ahead and start exploding this apart. So I'm going to go ahead and just use a transform tool to pull some parts out, something like that. We've got some additional parts here. And you'll see I can zoom in, I can rotate it, and I can take these guys and say, you know what, I want these to translate out to about here. Now I've lost my camera angle, that's what this view is here for, so I can always get it back. And then I'll just go ahead and create a new view to save my spot here. Now I have multiple components here that I would like to explode at all at the same time. So if I press tab, I can actually tab through components to make selections that are inside the assembly. So if I just go ahead and I tab through that and I say, you know what, I want that component, I want this component, I want that component. And I think those are the three. Oh, I also want this ring right there. All right, and then we're just going to use an anchor component for that guy there. And so what I can do with this is I can go ahead and say I want to explode all these out at the same time, and it's going to equally space them. So something like that. And grab these guys. I'm just going to bump them out a little bit just so I have more real estate here. There we go. We got our exploded view. If I move this video out of the way, we can kind of see what's going on there. So we got my exploded view laid out exactly how I want it. You'll see we're just about where we're at in SOLIDWORKS. I'm talking, I'm moving slow in Composer, I'm not working as hard as I could, and we're still keeping up with that video. If you want some exploded lines, select the bolts there. We go author, path, so associative path from the neutral location, which means that they're going to snap back to their neutral location. Now I got these paths, and you'll see they're black, they're through the objects. So we have built into Composer the ability to create templates. And what I can say is I can have my own custom template for lines, and I can just activate that. I can set that as my default, or I can just activate it whenever I want to use it. That just helps keep your company standards consistent throughout, you know, if you have multiple people creating documentation. So let's go ahead and select all these components here. Actually, you know what, I'm going to clean up these lines. So we'll hide them. I'll create a new view without them just because they're kind of in the way there. But we've got our components. Let's go ahead and now create the bill of materials. And so this guy said again, I'm going to go ahead and say I want to generate the BOM IDs, like to create the callouts, but I want to set these callouts to the top. And again, this can all be controlled by that template, so I can just have it pop in exactly how I want it. I wanted to keep this more realistic, so I wasn't using a bunch of templates and then creating stuff and they disappear at the perfect place and the perfect size and all that stuff, which I could totally do, and I could cut this whole process down to about 5 minutes. But I want this to be more realistic and not so demo magic. So you can actually see what I'm doing here to make it happen. All right, let's go ahead and show the BOM table. Again, that's popping at the bottom, but I want it to be a different font. are a different size, and maybe up here where my video is currently. So imagine having to work that way like that all the time where a video is in your way. That'd be frustrating. But yeah, so we got that. We got our view. We got everything. Let's go and hide that line. We don't really need that anymore, and something like that. Okay. So you see I'm already ahead of where we're at in SOLIDWORKS. We're still creating the BOM items there, balloons and repositioning. Got a table in here. But now I'm going to start creating the actual step-by-step assembly instruction. And I want to clean this up a little bit. I take these guys, I'm a little bit finicky when it comes to things like this where I want to really just, I don't know, I'm picky, right? I want them space how I want them to, so I can definitely do that and then just update when I'm happy with it. Now, when I start assembling this, I really want to bring to life the parts that are moving. So I'm going to change my rendering style. Let's change it to a flat technical and actually silhouette. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that my rendering style is going to vary between components. So I want to select all the parts I see on screen there, and I want to set those to silhouette. But the parts that I'm moving, I'm going to be setting to color. So for instance, I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to move this component. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say, I'm going to set that to a flat technical. That way you look at this, you know what component I'm going to move. I mean, it's very obvious, and there's very little text needed. It's the part that isn't black and white. It's the part that's colored. Now I'm going to go ahead and add a label to that to call out what it is. And let's go ahead and we'll say we want to create a step right before we move it. Click the guy, tell it to go back home. It's just going to go back to where it belongs. Create a step there. Now, if I zoom in, I can create, I don't have to zoom in, it's just easier to do it that way. I can create an arrow. So I'm going to go ahead and attach an arrow. I'm using a template for my arrow. I really like this arrow here, and you'll see that I just placed the arrow, but it's using my template for the size and the head and the shape and all that stuff. And it's a template that I have right here, and I call it my fancy yellow arrow because it's fancy. And I have a few other arrows that I could choose from that I've created in the past, but we're going to use that guy there. I like it. And then I want to update this view. And now if you see, if I take a step back, what happens? We got our part that's about to move, and then I go forward, the arrow appears with it, it moves with it. So that's what I'm talking about, that little bit of animation that it adds, and it has color, and it has movement, and it has two-dimensional stuff, three-dimensional stuff, and it's telling that story, and I really don't have to have much text to tell you what's happening in this step. Now, I just repeat this for the next step. So now I want to assemble this ring. So what I would do is I would create another step. I'd say, you know what, I don't need that. I don't need that. I'm just hiding, I'm not actually deleting anything. And the next part that I'm going to be moving is this part. So I want to go ahead, I want to set that to a flat technical. I'm also going to add a label to it. And I'm going to go ahead and update that view, that step, or that page, or whatever you want to call it. And then we're going to take it, we're going to tell it to go back home. And you see this is shifted a little bit off screen, so I'm just going to modify that. So you're not tied to have to keep everything in the same location. I mean, Composer is very versatile in the fact that you can move things around, you can reposition, and it's actually going to automatically fix that for you. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to update that. So for instance, if I go back here, you'll see this annotation will move a little bit slower than the part so it doesn't go off screen. So it has a lot of these built-in really cool tools to help you just work faster. Yep, we're going to hide those, hide those. Let's get a little bit fancier with this guy here. So what I want to do is I want to say, you know what, let's set it to the flat technical, but it's kind of small, and so let's go ahead and make it red. It really is bright. So this is the part that we're dealing with. And of course we probably want a label on there so you know what it is, even though the label is associated with the number, and the number has it right there. So the label's probably not that needed, but we'll stick it there anyways. And yeah, so let's update that. We'll send it home. Just like that. Do the same repositioning there. And why not? Let's go ahead and throw another arrow on this guy. Something like that. And if you don't like the arrow, if it's too close, you can always pull it back. You can put it wherever you want. Even though I moved that arrow, it's still going to move with that component. So again, take a step back. You'll notice I'm taking a step back, I'm playing a lot. I'm just doing that to show you guys how it reacts, right? And then we'll say the next step, don't need that, don't need these guys, and this guy shouldn't be red any longer. So I'm going to go into color, I'm going to restore its color, and it's going to go back to its default color, which is super convenient. I don't have to remember what that color is, it's automatically going to go back there. And let's take this guy. This guy we're going to do a little bit different too. So just switch it up, just make things a little bit funner here. So we got flat technical for that guy. It looks like it's already white. It's kind of boring. Let's make it green. I don't know. And let's go ahead and update this view. So what I want to do for this one is I actually am going to want to zoom in, and I want to show that in a little bit different detail. So let's go ahead and tell it to go back home, but it's actually screwing into location, right? So let's go ahead and show that. So if we do an arrow, I have a different kind of arrow. It's a circular arrow, and I'm just going to go ahead and apply that to the model. In my default arrow, it's quite large. I probably would want to use a different one. This guy's not bad, so use this guy and just make it, not step, but radius. We'll make it a bit larger. And because it's tied to this component, I don't like that green anymore because the arrow is green. Let's make it red. Some contrast. And we're going to rotate this guy just ever so slightly, just like that. It doesn't really matter. You just want to show some movement there. That way when I go from this step to this step, the camera is going to zoom in, but also that guy moves. And it moves real fast. You can control that speed, but really why I create that movement, because if I ever want to make an animation of this in the future, that video, it will actually animate that in the video, that movement, and I can slow it down. I can really show it spinning. So it's just a little trick. Okay, so now I want to go back out to my zoomed out view for my other parts, and I don't need that guy anymore. I don't need that guy anymore. And my component, which is right there, let's go ahead and restore its neutral properties for its color. And this will be another step. All right, so then we'll take this guy and let's do the same thing where we set the color just because we want to stay consistent here. We don't need that annotation, doesn't really matter. And we'll go ahead and send it home. So let's take it, restore, let's create our arrow. Which is right here. And we'll just want to snap an arrow anywhere. And this is really handy to show too. With the arrows inside, I think I showed this before, but let's go ahead and pull it out, show it again here. We can do something like that. Okay, and then for our last step, we will hide these guys. And we have one more part to show, or one more assembly to show. And we'll take these, restore, and create a step, but I want to show what these guys too is they're hidden in there, right? Let's go ahead and restore the color for this guy. And then also I want to set this guy back to that silhouette so we can see through it, and we can select those screws. So reselect the screws, and I want to make them that red so they really pop out and you can see them through the objects. So we've got them here, we've got them through objects, and we can still attach an arrow to them, something like that. And right through. And there we go. And then we'll just update that, and you'll see it take a step back. I guess the step would be here. And then we go like this, and it's going to shade out, and boom, like that. All right, so I've went ahead and I've created the entire step-by-step process. Let's go ahead and bring the engine back, something like this, just to wrap it up so you know that we're going to go from this last step, and then it will automatically animate to this step here. All right, let's take a pause here. I'm going to stop the video and see where we're at. So we have, I've went through and I've created a full step-by-step assembly instruction in Composer, and let's just thumb through it here. So I'm just going to say there's a little animation button. If I hit that animation, it actually will play through all the steps I just did. So it's going to go ahead and show us what we've done so far, and it animates it. And this is what I'm saying, that in Composer, you don't have to know how to animate to create an animation, because all I did was I created steps, which I would do if I was developing assembly instructions in any application, but Composer animates it for me. So if I wanted to, I could save this out as a video right now. and I could say, hey, here's my step-by-step animation video. Or I could save this out as a bunch of images in like 5 seconds, which I'll show here in a minute. But every single one of these steps will be an image. And I can bring that into a Word doc if I wanted to, or use in a website, or use anywhere I want. I mean, they're images. Or I could save this as a PDF, which I'll do as well, which is really the preferred method, I think, for Composer, because we want to develop a step-by-step assembly instruction, do all the steps, save as a PDF, done. In that case, I'd probably want to do some background templates and logos and approvals and revs or whatever you can totally do with annotations and notes for that PDF file. But really the point here is that you have multiple, you do all the work once and you choose how you want to publish it out. If I saved it as an exe, I have all this content in the player, just like that. Where with doing it I'm going to call the old school method, or the current method, I should say, in a lot of cases, if you're not using Composer, you get something like this. And let's just let's thumb through real quick. So we're at 14 minutes. So the whole process with explanations in Composer was 14 minutes. Again, if I use templates and I wasn't talking, it's like a 5-minute process, but we'll call it 14 minutes, sure, no problem. And you'll see in SOLIDWORKS where we're at is we've saved out the images, and then this is just a real quick template setup inside Word. And you could do this process for Composer as well. If you wanted to use Word with the images out of Composer, this process would be similar, where you import the images and everything like that. However, where the difference is, and I'm just going to let this keep running here, where the difference is that when I take file from Composer, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save out all those images. And so we'll say, yep, let's do high quality, let's do multiple, and we're going to save out every single one that you see on the left here. And I'll save those guys. I've got a publication folder, yep, right there. And it pushes out every single one. You'll see the status down here. I can't even talk fast enough before it's done. And what it did is it saved out these images here. So very high quality images. And you can do whatever you want with these images, and these images are linked back to SOLIDWORKS. So you update SOLIDWORKS, Composer updates, these images update. And it's just a push throughout the whole update process, and it takes just a few minutes. And so it's going to show that too. So while this is running, still the video, I'm going to go back to Composer, and I'm going to save this. So it doesn't, yeah, let's go ahead and save it, because we're going to update it. So now I'm going to say File Update, and I have my original SOLIDWORKS files. I have some updated files, so I'm going to go and say Update on that guy. So that will take a minute, and we'll switch back over to the SOLIDWORKS video and talk about what that's doing while this is updating. Because what it's doing is it's jumping back into SOLIDWORKS, it's pulling all that data over, and it's going through all of these views in Composer, and it's updating every single one. And so just a simple file update with whatever changes have been, the new CAD model or the updated CAD model, does all the work for you, and it's just a waste. You can go get some coffee and come back and it's done. Now with this process, and I think it's around 18 minutes where it starts. Right now it's jumping into Photoshop and it's actually inserting arrows because there's no good way of inserting an arrow in a CAD application or even in Word. The Word arrows just look really funky, and they're not attached to the images, and when you move the images they go all funky, and if you update the images, now they're in the wrong place. This is the method I stole from a lot of our customers, just visiting them and saying, hey, what is your current method? And like, oh, we use CorelDRAW, we use Photoshop, we use GLIP. We had arrows, we had annotations, text, sometimes even balloons and exploded lines and things like that can also be done in a Photoshop or image type program. Now the problem of doing it here is anything you do here, you pretty much have to redo. You do have to redo if the SOLIDWORKS CAD models update, because these are not associated back to CAD. And so the update process for the old way of doing the technical documentation is where the time savings come from Composer. So the development of the documentation is faster, but really the update, that's where you're going to save like 80% of your time, 75% of your time, really depending on the situation. But I mean, the updates are always very, very drastic. And there we go. So we got our updated views, and all I'm going to do is save as. Let's go back to that publications folder and just save. And see if I can jump into that folder before it's done updating. And you can see them updating right now. And it's done. And so you go into these images, These images are updated, and anywhere you use these images are going to be updated as well. So if you're using a Word document or Excel document or any InDesign publisher, you would insert and link those images, even your website. And then once these images are updated, those publications will be updated as well, assuming that this is on the network or something like that everybody has access to, which is a really good workflow to work with. Okay, so with that said, we are 18 minutes in, and then in SOLIDWORKS is still developing that Word document, the end publication. While that's running, let's go in here and let's publish out a PDF. So we'll say, and there's many different publications out of Composer. There's a PDF. Actually, I'm going to do let's do a print all views PDF. That way we can actually do the formatting here. So let's do landscape, and I just want to make sure that we're on legal and check up the DPI so it's nice and clean. All right, again, before I do this in a real life publication, I would definitely want to add like a background template, maybe some sign-offs and text and logos, just to make the page look a little bit neater than just a white background. That way, when you have the PDF, I saved it to my desktop, so I gotta make my way there. There we go. And there is the PDF file. Open up my other screen. Okay, so, and there it is. So there's the updated PDF, just like that. And we have our step-by-step. And you know, this works. It works great, but you lose that animation. You lose all that real cool stuff. Where in the Composer player, you're going to get a 3D environment. And the player, I mean, it looks exactly like Composer when you open it, really, without the edit tools. But you get all of this stuff. And so you get the ability to view it all, just like we showed in that previous publication. And this guy is done. So that was the development process in SOLIDWORKS. Let me just jump back into this video and fast forward. I'm going to pause and fast forward right to the end, just to see the end publication there. There we go. Okay, so here's the end publication in SOLIDWORKS, which is that Word document with the images. And you'll see this is very, very basic, right? There's no text in here. This is just a few steps. And I think we had, okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4 parts. I didn't even think about that. Where in Composer we had, how many parts did we assemble? So that's a 4-part assembly. This is 6-part assembly. So there you go, 6-part assembly. And I think it was at 13, 14 minutes when we finished that, opposed to the 20 minutes for the 4-part assembly in the CAD way of doing it, publishing out just a PDF, where in the same amount of time or drastically less, depending on if you're explaining the situation during the whole process we're working it, either way, you get many different outputs. We have the interactive player, we have the PDF, we have video, we got images or vector images, and it's just at the push of a button. Like if I wanted to save this out as vector content, I would simply go to the text illustration output, and I would say, hey, let's do a multiple for all these views, and I'll put a vector image. Let's just do one here. So we'll do like this image here, and I'll save this out, and sure, right in the publication, SVG, output, there's the status, it's done. That would be the status for every single one if I would have done multiple. And then we go back to that publication folder, move that video to the side, and it is right there. By default, I have it open with Internet Explorer. You can open Chrome or Firefox or, you know, really any browser, and it automatically links it all together for the highlighting of the bomb, balloons, and parts and everything like that. Okay, so jumping back to the PowerPoint, let's just minimize the SOLIDWORKS process there. And let's go to the next slide. So, and this is very forgiving, these numbers. This is just real general, what we found. But, and again, I mean, you're not going to ever create a full assembly instruction in 20 minutes. It's never going to happen. It's not using Composer, I should say. It will never happen because there's a lot of steps. And the very small example we've shown was just 4 parts. And so if you think, okay, if you have a 4-part assembly, sure, 20 minutes, yeah, you might be able to make it happen. but typically assembly instructions are much more complicated than that. This is just a real quick example where we got the 20 minutes to develop that, and that's taking the CAD models, creating configurations, exploding those apart, and then saving each one out as individual images. And then you go to update that document once it's created, and the process is repeated. There's no easy way to update that. You can find shortcuts and you can create these workflows, and you can probably cut 5 minutes off of that or something, but really, if you've ever taken a large assembly, created 50 different configurations, they have to be so perfect, and you have to really put a lot of thought in and say, oh, if I change the dimension here, every one of those configurations are still going to work, the spacing is going to work, everything. It's very, very hard to accomplish. So what happens most of the time is those configurations blow up, you got to go back through and clean them up, each one individually, which takes about as long as originally creating them, and you still got to export those images, and you're like, oh, I got to put arrows on them, and whatever else I need to add to those images, maybe some fine editing. Go into the Word document, right-click, replace image, bring the new one in, and then save it as a PDF. And so that process is about the same. Nothing is associative. But then you go into Composer, and it opens up that SOLIDWORKS model direct, and then it has tools built into it for these tasks because it's made for these tasks. It's made to create assembly documentation. So we're going to say 15 minutes to develop, where SOLIDWORKS it was 20. But keep in mind that's 1 doc versus 4 docs. So again, this is forgiving here. And then the update process is about 5 minutes. It's really less than that. But if you take in consideration you're going to update from SOLIDWORKS and you're going to update 4 different docs, it's going to take about 5 minutes because you got to export those images. You got to re-export the PDF and the video, which is a pretty quick process. But sure, let's say 5 minutes there. But everything is associative, and that's really the point here, is that when you do anything in Composer, you don't have to redo it. When you update SOLIDWORKS, even if you add new parts into the SOLIDWORKS assembly and you jump into Composer and you update it, those new parts are going to come in, and you move them around, you reposition them, and it's a real quick process, and you don't have to redo what you're working on. So we're going to say time for development, 25%, update, 75%. You can bump that up quite substantially if you consider that it's 4 documents instead of 1. That's assuming you're going to use all 4 documents. So, again, these are just some rough numbers, but still the time savings is definitely there.
Perfect. That was great. And likely you won't be using Composer with a live audience racing the clock on a video, so it'll be a little easier. We've got a handful of questions here that we're going to cover in just a second. And I also want to remind you guys that the next couple of Fridays we are going to have webinars covering other products in the technical communication suite. But let's start first here. I've got a good, fairly simple question from Don. He was asking, how is it that Composer can be sent to someone else, but don't they need a license, is what he's asking.
Yeah, great question. So what you do is there's an exe output from Composer. So when you're working in Composer and you're doing all your steps, you save as an executable file, and in that file is embedded the Composer player. And so you can send that file to anybody, and they can open it up, and it plays Composer. It doesn't give them edit rights, so they can't actually modify what you did, but they can see everything you did. They can go through the pages, they can play the animations, they can rotate the model, they can hide things. Now with that said, you can also put limitations on that file, and you can say, hey, you're not allowed to rotate it, or you're not allowed to pan, you're not allowed to zoom, you're not allowed to select, or you can enable those things. Measurement is another thing you can turn off and on for allowing. So you have full control over how much they can access that, or you can limit to protect your proprietary data if you want. So yeah, it's a really nice output there. Great question.
Perfect. I've got another question from Richard. He asks, can the vector graphics be imported back into your MCAD program to use for CAM programming?
Oh, interesting. Maybe. It's an SVG file, so as long as you have the ability to import an SVG file. Chances are maybe not, but there are actually converters. And so what I've done in the past, and just thinking about this, like if you wanted to bring that SVG back into SOLIDWORKS, it would be the same process. So yes, you can, but you just have to convert it from an SMG to a DXF, and there's a lot of free converters out there. There's also some web converters. There's like some websites they tell you to upload the file, and they send you a DXF. I've used it. I just don't trust them because I don't know what they're doing with my SVG file. But there's like a dozen free applications you can use that will actually convert it from SVG to DXF, and then you can do whatever you want with it. SVG files more, it's more for like web use, and like the whole Adobe suite, it opens it. Like if you had um, what program am I thinking of? The AI, Adobe Illustrator, will import SVG files and export DXF files. So that's another easy way to do it, or modify the SVG in Illustrator. But yeah, I mean, it's a CAD file, and you just got to convert it to something that your program can take. So another step there.
Cool. Have a couple of usage questions from Greg. He's asking, is it possible to update a part visibility in all the views, or change part rotation in all views without updating each view one by one?
Oh yeah, great question. You have full control over that. So let's say you had 50 views, and you had a part, and I'll go about this two different ways. So kind of two different angles here. Say that part is in SOLIDWORKS, it's blue. In Composer, you want it to be red, but you only wanted it to be red for two of the views. You can go in those two views and you can tell it to be red, and then you update the view, and it will keep that red color. And then when you update the document from SOLIDWORKS, those views, and say that blue part in SOLIDWORKS you change to green, those views that you specify would be red, those would stay red, the other ones would turn green. If you wanted everything to turn green, you click on those parts, you'd say restore neutral property for the color, and it would turn back green. The exact same thing I did when I actually assembled things. I had them red, and I said, hey, restore the coloring, it went blue or whatever color it was originally. So that's one way to do it. And the other way, let's say that you have your 50 views, and you have a part that you translated, you rotated, and you look at all the other views, and you're like, oh, do I have to go to each one of these and translate and rotate it? No, you click that view, and let me jump back into Composer just to show what I'm talking about here. And I'll just do it with this part here. And this is a real down dirty example, but I want to push it here. And let's say that I select all these other views, and this button right here will update views of selected actors. So all my other views, that part will then be in that location, or that rotation, or whatever, that color, or whatever I specified, it will be there. And so that is how that is done. So another good question.
Actually, while you had Composer up, he had another question. He was wondering about the keyboard shortcut that you're using to hide actors.
H for hide.
There you go. Nice. Thank you with like 6 exclamation marks from Greg for that one.
No problem.
We've got a couple of other questions that I will actually answer. So Robert and Cal had questions about licensing and cost and that sort of thing. So Cal, to answer your question, Composer is actually a separate program, just like what you saw. It's not an add-in, it's a separate window. And we have a handful of people that have Composer but don't have SOLIDWORKS. Their customers send them SOLIDWORKS or other CAD files. So it's not tied to a SOLIDWORKS license, if that answers your question. It also is a different user audience often too, because it's you're not actually changing geometry, and it's a very simplified interface compared to CAD that we see. Sometimes it's a summer student that uses Composer, sometimes it's a manager that uses Composer, sometimes it's someone in engineering. It's kind of all over the board because most people can learn it, and the training is only 9 hours. And Robert, I am happy to hear that you are proposing Composer to some people, but you are right, it is not a cheap software. It's about the same as a SOLIDWORKS professional license. But if you break it down to how often it's going to be used and the time savings per project, how many things are going to get done, that's the way to find the ROI and see if it's going to be a good fit for you. And I'd be absolutely happy to give you a breakdown. We even have a ROI calculator just for these types of situations, and this is what I do every day. So I'll reach out to you offline about that as well. Looks like Robert had another question. Will this work with other CAD tools,
Oh, great.
Creo and CATIA?
Great question. So other CAD tools. So we got, oh, that is not Composer. There we go. I'll show what we can open up direct. So basically, if it's a CAD tool, there's a way to get it into Composer, and we have the ability to import natively for quite a few models, so from different platforms. So you look here, these are what we can import direct, and if you have something like CATIA that won't import, you just save that as like a step file and then it will import. And actually IGES is my preferred method that way because it keeps the assembly tree. And from what I've tested, it also keeps the associativity. So I haven't fully tested that with large examples, but it seems to hold up pretty well because it jumps into that IGES file, it sees the bodies, and it compares the bodies after an update. As long as the bodies haven't changed name, which is their file type in CATIA, then the update remains. And it actually works out pretty slick. So yeah, great question, but I'll just leave this open if anybody else is looking at the different file types still.
Cool, that's all the questions that we have so far. If there's anything else, guys, feel free to type them in.
Another thing I'll just add here is that you're not tied to a single part or assembly that you're importing. And so this project that I imported in Composer, the buggy from SOLIDWORKS, you'll see that there's a root structure, and then I have that assembly. Inside this same project that I'm working in, I could import another assembly, a bunch of parts, an IGES file, a step file, you know, an inventor file, or whatever, Rhino file, and I could have all of them right here listed, and they actually retain their updates back to the original files. And so just by putting them here, I can nest and create assemblies in Composer, but still keep that a link back to those originals.
Nice. We have another good question here from Chris asking about training for Composer. So I'll start off answering that question. So training, well, we have tutorials on the website, which you probably have seen. By the way, you guys may or may not have noticed our website actually changed earlier this week. So the layout's a little different, it's a little sleeker, and we have all the videos in one place that you can actually filter by tutorial or by demonstration now, which is nice. But our class is really great. It's an online class, but it's still led by a live instructor, so it's kind of similar format to what we're doing right now. And it's a limited class size, so you still get some good time with the instructor and lab time. And we have an upcoming class at the end of this month, and I don't think we have next quarter's classes on the calendar quite yet, but we usually have something every month or every other month. We try to keep it pretty often. But Chris, I can send you info about the next classes coming up individually. But actually, I wanted to, while we've got everybody here, Scott, can you just kind of describe what the class is like for some people who maybe haven't heard of it or never attended?
Yeah, so the class is 4 hours, 3 days. 4 hours, 3 days in a row. So it's from 9 to 1. Typically it's held like a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Sometimes it's a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Every once in a while it's right in the middle of the week. We can have pretty good control over that though. But it covers, for one, everything that you've seen today, plus a lot more. So day one is really for conceptual things, because I mean it's a different program than SOLIDWORKS. So if you have been using SOLIDWORKS for years, you'll pick up Composer, but there's some conceptual things. So we covered those in detail on the first day of kind of what to expect from the software, how things behave, how to move things around. And then day two, we really get into more of the creating content. So a lot of exploded views and step-by-step and build materials. And then day three, we get into publications and things like marketing images and animations. And so really try to break it up. But the whole point of this class isn't just to teach you the software. And that if you get any books or any other classes besides the one that we've actually created this class, all those other classes, all those other content, it really teaches you, hey, this button does this, that button does that. That's what this tool does, and so on and so forth. And that's a lot for a lot of programs, which I just don't like. That's why we created this class, to say, hey, yes, that's good to know, but you also need to know how to use the software. You need to know when you go back to the office after taking class and you're creating your first project, you're actually able to work throughout the project. And then we're here all the time too. So after you take the class, you're working through the project, you hit some snags, you just contact us and we'll give you a hand. So we've really put it together specifically to help these situations.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but good things about the classes, so definitely check it out if you haven't been. And that's all the questions that we have so far.
Let me get back through. Sorry, I forgot to pull this guy up. So this is Blaine's contact info. So if you have any questions or anything, reach out to him. If it's technical, go ahead and reach out to him too, and he'll just put you in touch with me. Yeah, that'll be probably the best way to work.
Yeah, exactly. We'll filter you to the right people. But if there's something that you guys wanted to maybe test out specifically with your own parts, or want to get this in front of a group of people that you work with and get everybody on board and on the same team, we're happy to help with that kind of stuff. And we've got a lot of resources and case studies too that show you what people are doing with it, and make sure you guys feel like you're not a guinea pig and this is something that works and has been working for a long time.
Awesome. So yeah, we'll go ahead and start to shut it down here, but I'll go and leave this up for another 5 minutes. So if there's any other questions that come in, go ahead and just type that, and we'll pop back in. I think that last one, Blaine, for where do I find training for Composer? Did you already see that one? Because there was kind of two training questions there. Okay. Yeah, from our website. Cool. Alrighty.
Yeah, and Chris, I'll reach out to you directly. I think we have your email from the registration for this webinar, so I can send you that info. Oh, another one. Is it possible to create an animation of 2D subassemblies to create more understanding for our installers?
Yes. Yep. So once you import everything into Composer, and that assembly tree comes over, so the structure of subassemblies, and even if the structure isn't quite right, so let's say that there's some parts at the top level, there's a couple parts inside, 2 or 3 subassemblies you want to group together. In Composer, you can group those together and create an animation of just that. However, if it is grouped together as subassemblies, you just click on that subassembly, isolate it, much like I've shown today. Actually, you isolate that subassembly, create the assembly, or create the step-by-step. Now what I didn't show today is there's a full timeline in Composer, and you can drag and drop those steps into the timeline, and you can break the timeline up per sections. They're called markers. So you mark like 1 second to 8 seconds, or 10 seconds to 50 seconds, and that's a segment of animation. And so for every subassembly in your assembly, you can have a marker sequence in the timeline, and then output those as videos, and have an assembly process for every subassembly, and then even assembly process for assembling those together into your main assembly. So absolutely.
And while we're on the subject of 2D, also there's the image library.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just noticed that that I might have understood the question wrong. So that is for your full subassembly. Now, an animation of a 2D subassembly, I mean, we can output that as 2D from the 3D model, but if it's in 2D, like a DXF or something of a subassembly, we're not going to be able to animate that in Composer. So I just want to make sure I understand the question right. So if you don't have a 3D model, we're not going to be able to animate it, but if you do have a 3D model, yes, we can animate it. And then what Blaine was saying about the 2D library, it's just a drag and drop, hammers, screwdrivers, things like that.
Yeah, well, any 2D image, because you can put your own images in there too. Another question. Can Composer show and animate CAM add-in programs for toolpaths?
You can fake it. I've done it before. So what you do is you have your block. So you have your SOLIDWORKS part, and how we did this in the past was actually we took basically a cube and cut into it and made the design part. So start out with a cube. That way we could have different configurations of, hey, this is a block of aluminum, and this is how it finishes, and maybe some steps in between to show specific movements. Then in Composer, you can take like a cylinder. It's called primitive geometry, or you could import your own toolings if you actually have that model to get real specific. But typically a cylinder does the job. And what you can do is you can take that those different configurations, bring them all into Composer, or just bring the last one in, and then have the tool path, and you can animate that as, hey, we're going to drill this out, we're going to carve this out, and I mean, it doesn't actually show the tool path and the parts, eating away at the part, eroding the part, or drilling through the part. It doesn't actually show that, but it gets the point across. And so it's something we can do, but it is animation trickery. But yeah. Oh, did we lose connection?
I don't think so. But actually,
Okay.
Greg just typed in, "Hey, you guys still there?" So maybe the
Yeah.
audio is cutting in and out.
Did you hear, Blaine? Did you hear what I just said though? That was okay. Cool.
No,
Yeah.
everybody can hear us. We're good.
Okay. Awesome. Looks like we just had a person that lost audio. So I just want.
Okay.
We didn't lose it for everybody, so we're good.
Yeah.
Awesome. And that whole toolpath thing, hit me up if you are really trying to create that, and I'll give you some pointers. And it's just little tricks you can play with to get the output how you want it.
Good stuff. And thank you guys, thank you everybody for participating today and asking questions and learning stuff. And hopefully you've got some more information than you had before this session. And if there's anything else that we can help with or something that you need, let us know.
Yeah. Thanks, guys, and have a great rest of your day. Have a great weekend, and hopefully we hear from you soon.